She sat there, right in the middle of the courtroom, back straight, eyes calm to an almost unbelievable degree. Jennifer Pan didn't look like someone who had just gone through a family tragedy. She bowed her head at the right moments, wiped tears at the right moments, but every movement felt rehearsed. Occasionally she looked up, gazing toward the jury with an expression that was nearly confident, even a little smug, as if she believed she was still controlling the narrative.
911, Drew.
Help me, please. I need help.
Calm down. What's going on?
Someone broke in and I heard shots. I don't know what's happening. I'm tied upstairs. Dad?
Hello?
I'm okay.
In 2014, at the Ontario Superior Court, the story she carried was all too familiar. She was the sole surviving victim of a home invasion robbery on the night of November 8, 2010. The night her mother was shot dead and her father was gravely wounded. Defense lawyers emphasized the image of a young woman traumatized, a daughter who watched her family destroyed in mere minutes. And in that moment, it seemed everything was going according to her plan. The entire courtroom listened. Jennifer continued her role silent, fragile, pitiable. But then the prosecutor stood up and one single sentence shifted the entire atmosphere. This was not a robbery. It was a premeditated murder plot. Several eyes immediately turned toward Jennifer. She held her posture, only blinking slightly as if this didn't surprise her. That calm wasn't the calm of a victim, it was the calm of someone who believed she had accounted for every possibility. Then the prosecutor continued. There was one survivor, and that person remembered exactly what happened. When the name Weeheen Han Pan was mentioned, for the first time the confidence on Jennifer's face wavered. The father she thought was dead was still alive, and he had seen her that night. This is the case of a daughter who believed she could plan the murder of her parents and get away with it through a perfect performance. And every detail I'm about to show you has been verified to court records, police reports, text message data, and trial testimony. The evening of November 8, 2010 began like any other ordinary evening at the Pan family home in Markham, Ontario, a quiet suburban neighborhood where the streets usually emptied after 9 p.m. Between around 9:30 and 10 p.m., 3 armed men approached the front door. There was no broken glass, no signs of forced entry or prying. The door opened easily, almost as if they had been expected. This was a detail no one noticed at the time, but it later became one of the key points of the entire case. Inside the house, B.K. Peenan was in the living room when she was subdued first. The armed men moved in quickly and decisively, shouting orders and taking control of the space in seconds. Upstairs, Hue Han Pan was asleep when he was awakened by one of the intruders pointing a gun directly at his head. He was dragged out of bed. Everything happened fast, precisely, and in an organized manner, unlike a spontaneous robbery. Meanwhile, Jennifer Pan, who was upstairs, later claimed she was on the phone when she heard strange noises, opened the door, and immediately had a gun pointed at her. She described herself as panicked, being dragged, being tied up, but later details showed she wasn't as surprised as her account suggested. The attackers repeatedly demanded money, asking for cash and searching certain areas to create the appearance of a robbery. Jennifer handed over about $2,500 in savings from her piano teaching, along with about $11,100 her mother kept in a drawer, totaling around $30,600. However, they touched none of the other valuables in the house. The 2 luxury cars, a Lexus and a Mercedes, remained untouched in the garage. Electronics, remaining cash, jewelry, and other valuables were all left behind. This behavior didn't match a typical robbery but fit perfectly with a plan that had a specific target. After gaining control of the entire house, the attackers brought Mr. and Mrs. Pan down to the basement. They were forced to turn their backs, kneel, and have blankets thrown over their heads. There was no chance to resist, no escape. In those final moments, Bishop Pan said something that later became a haunting detail in the case file. She begged the attackers to spare her daughter. She believed Jennifer was also a victim, that she was being threatened just like them. She didn't know it was her own daughter who had let these men into the house. Right after that, gunshots rang out in the confined basement space. 5 shots were fired at close range. Bishop Pan was shot multiple times in the back before a final bullet struck the back of her head, killing her instantly. Hue Han Pan was shot in the face, a severe wound that in most cases would cause immediate death. Yet he didn't die. He collapsed but remained alive, though at that moment he couldn't move or speak. Upstairs, Jennifer was not shot, not beaten, and had no injuries at all. She was tied with shoelaces to the staircase railing, hands behind her, but there were no signs of tight restraint or complete immobilization. This binding method was later determined to be loose enough for her to move. After finishing, the attackers left the house quickly. Around 10:30 p.m., Jennifer made the call to 911. Her voice trembled and broke, repeatedly saying she was tied up, that intruders had broken in, and that her parents had been shot. The call was lengthy, with her describing her situation and pleading for help in what was presented as panic. However, this very call later became one of the most critical pieces of evidence because the way she spoke, her word choices, and the unusual pauses raised questions for investigators. What happened between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. that night was not a random chain of events, but a prearranged sequence of actions, each step serving a specific purpose. And throughout the entire process, Jennifer wasn't caught up in it. She was the one who knew exactly what would happen next. Right after the 911 call around 10:30 p.m. On November 8, 2010, York Regional Police arrived at the scene and initially treated it as an armed home invasion robbery because what they first saw seemed to fit that scenario. A mother dead in the basement, a father gravely wounded and rushed to the hospital, and a daughter tied up upstairs in a panicked state. Jennifer Pan was considered the main witness, the only one who could recount what happened. She cooperated, answered questions, and repeated her story that 3 men had burst in, demanded money, and opened fire. But within the first few hours, investigators began noticing inconsistencies. The house showed no signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no pry locks. Valuables remained untouched. The 2 Lexus and Mercedes cars in the garage, electronics, remaining cash in the house all left behind. If this was a robbery, the financial motive wasn't carried out logically. And if it wasn't a robbery, a bigger question emerged. What was the real target? Attention quickly turned to Jennifer. She was the only one unharmed, despite being in the house during the attack. This alone was unusual, but the way she described being tied up raised even more suspicion. She said her hands were bound behind her with shoelaces and secured to the staircase railing. Yet when investigators asked her to demonstrate how she retrieved her phone and made the 911 call in that condition, they found it nearly impossible if she had truly been tightly bound. She could perform the action, but only if the ties were loose enough to allow movement. This was a small detail, but enough to plant doubt. In the days that followed, police continued monitoring Jennifer not just through her statements but through her actual behavior. At her mother's funeral, where relatives and friends gathered to mourn, Jennifer didn't display the expected grief. There were no strong emotional outbursts, no mental collapse commonly seen in those who suffered sudden loss. Those present began noticing an inexplicable coldness. Investigators, already suspicious, paid even closer attention to every small detail. They went back and listened to the 911 call Jennifer made. At first, it sounded like a desperate plea for help, but when replayed multiple times and analyzed closely, anomalies emerged. The way she spoke, the way she described the situation, the unnatural pauses all suggested the story might have been prepared in advance. One question that puzzled investigators the most was, why didn't the father, despite being shot and hearing his daughter scream, call out to her or try to reach her? That question had no immediate answer because the only person who could explain Yue Han Pan was still in a coma at the hospital. The turning point in the case came at the end of 2010 when he woke up. After recovering enough to communicate, he gave a statement completely contradicting his daughter's story. He said he clearly remembered what happened that night. He not only remembered the attackers, but also remembered Jennifer's behavior. According to him, Jennifer wasn't tied up during the initial process. He saw her moving around the house, unrestrained, and more importantly, he saw her talking to one of the men in an intimate way, as if they already knew each other. This detail completely changed the direction of the investigation. Jennifer was no longer seen as a victim, but as a suspect. Police began expanding the investigation beyond the family. They examined Jennifer's relationships and quickly focused on Daniel Wong, her boyfriend whom her family disapproved of. When questioned, Wong initially denied any involvement, but mounting evidence forced him to change his story. Police discovered Wong's connections to people with criminal records who could organize such an attack. From there, they tracked down the direct participants. Alongside this, phone data became a crucial source of evidence. Although Jennifer had tried to delete some data by removing the SIM card, the device still retained message history. Digital forensics experts extracted hundreds of messages between Jennifer and the involved parties. Among them were clear directive phrases like game time and VIP access. These messages not only showed communication, but demonstrated Jennifer's active role in coordinating the timing and method of the attack. One of the most critical pieces of evidence came from combining message data with security camera footage. A camera from a house across the street captured the lights in Jennifer's room turning on and off repeatedly right before the attackers entered. When cross-referenced with message timestamps, investigators found an almost perfect match. They concluded this wasn't random signaling, but Jennifer's way of indicating the door was open and everything was ready. What began as an apparent robbery gradually turned into an organized murder case, with evidence coming not just from testimony, but from undeniable objective data. To understand why Jennifer Pan could decide to hire people to kill her own parents, we need to go back many years before the night of November 8, 2010, when everything was still a story of expectations, pressure, and lies that began to accumulate. Jennifer was born in 1986 into a Vietnamese immigrant family in Canada, where her parents, who had endured a difficult refugee journey, placed all their hopes on their children. For them, success wasn't a choice, it was an obligation. Cui Han Pan practiced a parenting style many call tiger parenting: strict discipline, tight control, and near absolute expectations for academic achievement. Jennifer was required to get high grades, excel at piano, and pursue a stable career path like medicine or pharmacy. To outsiders, she was the perfect child, but the reality underneath was entirely different. Jennifer couldn't keep up with those expectations. She struggled academically and ultimately didn't graduate high school. Instead of confessing, she chose to lie. It started with small lies, then grew into a complete fabricated system. She forged report cards by editing documents, created fake acceptance letters, and even built a story that she was studying pharmacy at Ryerson University. Every day she left home like a student, carrying books. But in reality, she didn't attend classes. She created a fake life so detailed that even her family didn't notice. She talked about exams, professors, courses all non-existent. For years, Jennifer didn't just lie to others. She seemed to convince herself that this life was real. Alongside this fake life, she maintained a secret relationship with Daniel Wong, someone her parents didn't approve of. Wong was involved in criminal activities and drug dealing, completely opposite to the image the Pan family wanted. Because of this, the relationship had to be hidden, becoming another part of the double life Jennifer was maintaining. Everything began to collapse around 2009 to 2010 when her parents discovered the truth. They followed her, found out she wasn't going to school, uncovered years of lies. Their reaction wasn't gentle. They tightened control. Jennifer was forbidden to go out without permission, restricted from using the phone, closely monitored in every movement. Her relationship with Wong was cut off. Her car was checked for mileage. Her life, built on a foundation of fabrication, started to fall apart completely. In that situation, Jennifer faced two choices: admit everything and accept the consequences, or keep lying and find a way to escape the control. She chose the second option, but at a far more extreme level. The pressure didn't just come from her parents, but also from the need to protect the entire fake story she had built over years. If the truth came out, she would lose everything: trust, her place in the family, and the life she had built with Wong. In that context, Jennifer's motive didn't stem from a single cause, but from a combination of factors: the desire to escape her father's control, the need to maintain her relationship with Wong, the fear of her entire fake life being exposed, and the potential financial benefit from family assets after her parents' deaths. These factors didn't automatically lead to crime, but in Jennifer's case, they combined in a dangerous way. Instead of finding a way to correct her mistakes, she began looking for ways to eliminate the problem. And in her mind, the problem was her parents. From that thought to action was a calculated process. She didn't act impulsively. She planned. She found people. She discussed details of how to carry it out. Hiring someone to kill her parents wasn't the spur-of-the-moment decision, but the result of a chain of thoughts in which she placed her personal interests above all moral values. What stands out is that throughout this entire process, there was no sign of hesitation or stopping. She kept moving forward step by step until the plan was executed on the night of November 8, 2010. The trial of Jennifer Pan and her accomplices officially began in 2014 at the Ontario Superior Court and lasted many months before reaching a verdict on December 13, 2014. Drawing special attention from Canadian media and the public due to the shocking nature of the case, a daughter accused of masterminding the murder of her own parents. From the start, the prosecution built the case clearly. This wasn't a spontaneous event or a loss of control, but a carefully planned murder conspiracy involving multiple people and orchestrated by Jennifer herself. They presented the jury with a logical sequence of events, from motive to contacting accomplices to the execution method and subsequent cover-up behavior. The core of the prosecution rested on specific evidence. Yue Han Pan's testimony became one of the strongest elements because he not only survived but directly saw his daughter that night, unbound, and interacting with the perpetrators. This completely shattered the story Jennifer had told from the beginning. In addition, the extracted text message data from Jennifer's phone played a pivotal role. Hundreds of messages showed continuous contact between her and the involved parties, including clear directive content like game time and VIP access sent right before the attack occurred. When these messages were displayed in court, they weren't just digital evidence, but direct confirmation of Jennifer's active role in the plan. Security camera footage from the house across the street, capturing the lights in Jennifer's room turning on and off at the exact time the messages were sent, further reinforced the argument that she had actively signaled the killers. Additionally, the connection between Jennifer and Daniel Wong was clarified. Wong, who had a romantic relationship with Jennifer and links to the actual perpetrators, became a key link in proving how the plan was carried out. When called as a witness, Wong's testimony confirmed that Jennifer had expressed a desire to eliminate her parents so she could continue the relationship without interference. Faced with the growing mountain of evidence, the defense team had to take a different approach. They argued that Jennifer had no intention of killing her parents, but had actually hired people with the goal of killing herself, a form of suicide by proxy, where she wanted to end her life due to psychological pressure and control. According to this argument, the original plan wasn't to kill her parents, but to commit suicide through others, and her parents being shot was an unintended consequence when the plan changed or lost control. However, the prosecution quickly rebutted this by pointing out that Jennifer's entire course of behavior didn't match someone wanting to commit suicide. The messages showed no signs of self-destruction. Instead, they demonstrated calculation, coordination, and specific instructions to the killers. The fact that she wasn't injured, wasn't targeted in the attack, and her actions afterward, including staging the scene and calling 911, all showed the plan's target wasn't herself. In addition, testimony from accomplices and physical evidence at the scene reinforced that Jennifer was the coordinator, not the victim of an unintended plan. Throughout the trial, the jury faced a core question: who was Jennifer Pan in this story, a girl caught in an uncontrollable tragedy? Or the person at the center directing everything from start to finish? The courtroom atmosphere was always tense, with moments when evidence changed how attendees saw things. The text messages, camera images, and especially the father's testimony created an increasingly clear picture. The clash between prosecution and defense wasn't just legal, but about interpreting behavior and motive. Every detail was analyzed, every word placed under a microscope, and as the trial neared its end, the story Jennifer had once constructed began to lose credibility, piece by piece, under the weight of undeniable evidence. On December 13, 2014, after months of tense proceedings and hours of deliberation, the jury at the Ontario Superior Court finally delivered its verdict on Jennifer Pan, marking an irreversible turning point in a case that had shocked Canada. In the courtroom at that moment, the air felt almost thick, every eye fixed on the defendant as each charge was read aloud. Jennifer was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of her mother and attempted murder of her father, Shui Han Pan. This was no longer suspicion or competing hypotheses, it was the official conclusion based on all the evidence presented in court. The sentence handed down afterward reflected the severity of the crime. Life imprisonment with no possibility of parole for 25 years. The maximum penalty for premeditated murder under the Canadian legal system. The accomplices in the case, including Daniel Wong, Wenford Crawford, and David Nilvaganam, also received similar sentences, closing their roles in a plan determined to be organized, premeditated, and clearly coordinated. When the judge read the sentence, he emphasized that this was not an impulsive act or loss of control, but a calculated case planned in advance with a specific target and carried out with a high degree of ruthlessness. The fact that a daughter planned to kill her own parents was not only a violation of the law, but a breach of the most basic moral standards. In the moment, many expected an emotional collapse. Jennifer's reaction went in a different direction. She didn't burst into tears, didn't panic, didn't show clear breakdown. Instead, she stood or sat still, keeping her face relatively calm, almost unchanging as she heard the sentence. That silence wasn't the silence of someone in shock, but resembled a cold acceptance, or even emotional emptiness. For those who followed the case from the beginning, this image reinforced an emerging perception throughout the trial. Jennifer showed no clear remorse for what happened. There was no public apology, no sign that she truly accepted responsibility for her actions in the way the court and society expected. In addition to the prison sentence, the court issued a supplementary order. Jennifer was prohibited from contacting remaining family members, especially her surviving father. This order wasn't just legal but symbolic, a complete severance between her and whatever remained of the family she was once part of. In that moment, everything Jennifer had tried to build from the victim narrative to the plan to hide the truth lost all value. The details she thought she controlled, from staging the scene to recounting events to eliminating evidence, were dismantled piece by piece throughout the investigation and trial. After the sentence was pronounced on December 13, 2014, the courtroom entered one of its heaviest moments, the victim impact statement. Hue Han Pan, who survived a close-range gunshot, was brought to court to face his daughter, the person he once trusted completely. The room fell silent as he began to speak. His voice wasn't loud or dramatic, but each word carried the weight of an unchangeable truth. He spoke of the pain not only from losing his wife, but from the betrayal by his own daughter. He recalled the years that had passed, what he and his wife had sacrificed to build a life for the family, and how it all ended in a single night. There was no explosive anger, but a clear devastation in every word. He said he still hoped Jennifer would one day recognize her mistake, that he hadn't completely given up hope for change. But at the same time, he affirmed that what happened could not be undone. The moment he said, "It was the lies that destroyed this family," became the highlight of the entire trial. Not because it was a prepared statement, but because it summed up the entire essence of the case. A chain of lies stretching over years, ultimately leading to irreversible violence and loss. Throughout that statement, Jennifer Pan remained silent. She didn't interrupt, didn't react strongly, but also didn't show clear remorse. There was no direct apology to her father, no full acknowledgement of responsibility for what happened. That silence, in the context of everything presented in court, no longer carried neutral meaning. It was understood as an absence of emotion, or at least an unwillingness to face the consequences in the way society expected. After the trial, many psychologists and criminologists analyzed Jennifer's behavior and concluded she fit the profile of someone with antisocial tendencies, where the individual places personal interests and desires above moral standards and consequences for others. In this case, the decision to hire people to kill her parents didn't stem from impulse, but from a calculated thought process in which factors like control, personal benefit, and maintaining the fake life were prioritized. Jennifer Pan's case thus became a classic example in the study of parricide children killing parents, particularly in cases not involving self-defense or acute mental disorder, but driven by motives of control and personal gain. It shows that in some instances, the combination of prolonged lying, psychological pressure, and a controlling environment can lead to extreme decisions, but it cannot justify the behavior. More importantly, this case also highlights the role of unforeseen factors in dismantling a criminal plan. Jennifer may have calculated many details, how to stage the scene, how to recount the story, how to eliminate some evidence, but she couldn't control her father surviving. She couldn't control the digital data retained on the phone, and it was those factors, a living witness, and those text messages, that became the decisive pieces, causing the entire plan to collapse. Looking back at the whole case, what stands out isn't just the violence, but how a fabricated story could be maintained for so long and then dismantled by seemingly small details. And at the end of this story, there is no ambiguity. The sentence has been handed down, the truth established, and what remains is consequences no one can change. A plan can be built to look perfect on paper, can be executed with thorough preparation, but reality always contains uncontrollable elements. And in this case, those very elements brought the truth to light despite every effort to hide it. A plan can be perfect on paper, but the truth always finds a way to emerge. If you find this story thought-provoking, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next haunting true crime cases. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.